Hi, friends and family, and everyone listening to this. Augustus and I, over the last 2 weeks, have been having some of the most difficult conversations that we've had in our 12 years together. This has just brought forth a lot of pain that I've experienced individually. It's brought forth a lot of pain that we experienced together as a couple. And it's really forced us to acknowledge some of the challenges that we face raising two biracial children in the families that we have and in the society that we live in. I really wanted to take this opportunity to say that I have been so moved by all my friends and family even who have posted such educational information in their stories, in their posts. I can speak for myself in saying that some of the posts and stories that I found most moving were the ones where my Black friends shared, their personal traumas. I continue to struggle with my identity, and that's something that I think all Black people struggle with in a country that is so deeply entrenched in white supremacism. So to have the opportunity to hear stories that people have had to bury so deeply for so long has been immensely humbling and quite frankly cathartic, I'm sure, in my case and in the case of many. So Augustus and I really wanted to take this opportunity to speak directly to those friends and family who haven't really spoken or engaged very much in the Black Lives Matter movement, and to share our experience, in my case as a Black woman and, in our case as an interracial couple, to hopefully highlight for you why it feels so deeply personal for us that some of you have remained silent, and why, for us it's just frankly dehumanizing. So I'll turn it over to Augustus, who will kind of give you a bit more background on how he's experienced the last 2 weeks, and just like a bit more about us as a couple in a way that maybe you guys haven't seen on my social media.
The last couple of weeks have been essentially a lot of conversation, but a lot of me watching Ottawa and her sister essentially go through and relive a lot of pain, and essentially be reminded with great force that we live in a society where your skin color will determine to a large extent how you're treated. And I'm actually going to go into quite some detail about this. But in terms of being a white person in the society, if when you look at the outcomes that we have across the society, whether it's how police treat people, whether it's whether you can advance in the professional workplace, whether it's educational outcomes, even life expectancy, when you see the disparities, there's only two conclusions you can draw. One of them is there's a pathology in non-white population, which if you have anybody who is Black in your life who's close to you, that's not the case. Or you can draw the conclusion that there's a pathology in how society treats people. And if you spend any time exploring this topic, you will realize that there is a pathology in our society in terms of how we are treated. And I think if that works, I'm going to sort of share with folks how our last 13 years, almost 13 years, have been different. So Ottawa and I are essentially almost like a controlled social experiment wrapped in a marriage. We have extremely similar social, sort of professional backgrounds and extremely similar credentials. We're both immigrants. We were both born abroad. I grew up in Lithuania. Ottawa grew up for the large part of her childhood was in the U.S., but we were both born abroad. We are both naturalized citizens. We both attended Princeton at the exact same time, part of the same class. We both studied very, very similar things, almost identical in some fashion. We both were politics majors. We both took advanced French and Arabic courses. Both did a Near Eastern Studies certificate. So essentially our academic background is very similar. We both took 2 years off of education to gain some work experience. We both applied to law school, ended up at very similarly ranked law schools in New York City, almost identically ranked and identically regarded law schools. I ended up at NYU. Ottawa went to Columbia. Both went into the private sector, worked at the exact same law firm at the exact dates, same dates. Literally, we started on the same day. We left the firm on the same day. We both moved to Philadelphia, obviously, at the same time. Started working at large Philadelphia corporate law firms on the exact same date, I believe. So for the last almost 13 years, we have academically and professionally walked a very similar path, extremely so. I would actually be surprised if you found a couple who have literally stepped together for so many years. That being said, the fact that we have walked such similar paths superficially has been eye-opening because, I came to this country as a guest. I was a student on a student visa. And in the last nearly 13 years, I have never once been rudely mistreated by anybody, honestly. Maybe somebody has been rude to me, but just because they're a rude person, but not because of who I am, honestly.
Right.
When I was still a student at Princeton University, I used to go visit my parents, my family back home in Lithuania, and on one occasion when I flew back to the US and was walking through immigration and showed my papers, which was a Lithuanian passport with a student visa stamped on it, the officer handed it back to me and said, "Welcome home," despite the fact that it wasn't my home. I was merely a guest on a student visa.
I mean, like, since then, so many people have commented how surprised they are that you are foreign born, foreign raised. Yeah, I mean, even for some of my own close friends, whenever I say that you went to high school in Lithuania and lived in Lithuania until you were 19 years old, it really comes as a surprise for a lot of people.
Yeah, and to be honest, that was like one of the reasons why when I became a citizen, when I was sort of making my way to becoming a citizen, I constantly sort of remembered, like, this country has treated me so nicely. And I was excited to become a U.S. citizen.
Right. But, like, in my case, for instance, like, I had a partner quite recently ask me what my high school experience in Mogadishu was like, which is a bit ridiculous. I'm from Sudan, not Somalia, for the record. Yeah, I mean, having people, give me a different name, never had anyone at the airport tell me welcome home. Going through TSA is always a bit fraught.
When you say give you a different name, can you please expand on that? Because that's...
Yeah, I mean, like, folks have seen in, my stories that, in middle school, a group of white girl classmates decided that Arwa was too difficult and that they would give me the name Stacy because I looked like a Stacy. And, just kind of wanting to fit in and always being really cognizant of my difference, not only, because of my skin color, but just being, straight up foreign. I just, I'm pretty sure I just said sure, sounds good. But, yeah, I mean, I was, even in law school, having, my name mixed up with a black male was ridiculous. I had only 3 other black people in my section, my 1L year, and my first semester, my torts professor calls me Miss X, when, my last name is Y, and X was actually the last name of a boy in our torts class. There were only 2 black males and 2 black females, and he couldn't even keep us separated, which was unfortunate.
And I kind of more than once.
Yeah,
also.
and I let it pass. But then, second semester, this same male got called Arwa by our crim law professor, and then that just seemed ridiculous. I mean, given how many white males are in your class at any given point, I do find it surprising that happened to me twice in a year, and by 2 different people, and it's just never happened to you ever.
For the life of me, I did not recall at any point being called somebody else's name, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, what, like, our similarities kind of, like, as being, like, immigrants, people who, socioeconomically felt a bit at the fringe at Princeton, kind of is, like, what kept us together. And race, honestly, didn't really, like, play a huge factor in our relationship for a really long time. And like in retrospect, some really crazy stuff happened at Princeton that could definitely be colored in racial terms. And I'm kind of making peace with that now, and we're kind of, you know, reconciling it now. But it's really like in law school when it first started. I mean, being, you know, having that happen to me with professors, having, you know, a partner, my, you know, as a summer associate, call me an exotic creature, and that was in the presence of an Asian partner who didn't say anything, didn't check to make sure that I was like, you know, not shook completely by being called that. And then later when I was telling another Black associate what had happened, he basically told me never to speak of it again. That was just like how oppressive the culture was. And yeah, I mean, I think then, you know, we started off at Cleary together, and there's something really crazy happened there that I definitely want to share. So he mentioned that we both started off our careers at Cleary Gottlieb. It's a great firm. One thing that I absolutely love there and miss and will forever miss is, you know, the Black community at Cleary. It's an excellent firm. You know, there's an awesome cafeteria at the New York office, went there all the time. And there was one worker there who, for some reason, just didn't like me at all. Like, he would serve me my food very grudgingly. I always smiled, called him sir. You know, we tried to ask about his like weekend or how his day is going, and just did not seem interested in engaging with me at all for no reason at all, but seemed to love my Latina white passing office mate, basically roommate. So on one instance, I had gotten a sandwich from the grill station, which is separate from the sandwich and like salad station, whatever. Grab my sandwich from the grill, want some Chipotle mayo on it, which is not available at the grill. So I walk over to the sandwich station where, you know, the same, you know, man is working. Very politely ask if I could have just, you know, a small little cup of Chipotle mayo to put on my sandwich. And he tells me, no, it's not possible, that they just don't give out condiments for food given at other stations in the same cafeteria. I thought that was a little bizarre. I asked, like, could I please just have like a little bit? Would really appreciate it. There's like, I'll go grab a cup for you from like, you know, a little condiment cup for you to just pour this sauce into it. And he very grudgingly, you know, puts in like a couple drops of Chipotle. It was absolutely absurd. I asked him if he could fill it up a bit more. He rolls his eyes at me. At this point, there's like a line behind me and everyone is witnessing this. I'm absolutely humiliated. Gives me my Chipotle mayo droppings. And I go back to my office. I mean, basically just like burst out into tears. It was so humiliating. It really got me in my feelings. So I call Augustus, and at this point, he's heard me talk about how this man has been so rude to me. He thinks this man is just rude. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it's racist because he's so nice to my office mate. This doesn't seem right. He's so nice to everyone else. I haven't seen him interact with a lot of Black associates. Admittedly, there aren't a ton in the cafeteria at the same time as me at any given time. So we're gonna run a little bit of an experiment. You're gonna go downstairs and you're going to ask for Chipotle mayo. And, you know, I think like your first instinct is like, is this like really necessary? Like, is it even that serious? There's a little bit of pushback. I knew I wasn't crazy though. So I asked Augustus to go down, and he's going to tell you what happened.
Yeah, so I ran this sting operation. I went downstairs. I don't even recall if I actually got myself anything to put the mayo on. I just, initially I stood in line at the sandwich station, waiting to get this Chipotle mayo, and then the man asked me, what are you waiting for? And I said, oh, I just want to get some Chipotle mayo. And he said, oh, you don't even have to stand in line, just ask for it, I'll give it to you on the side. Like, you literally don't even have to stand in line.
Don't stand in line, like, no problem, have whatever you want. Very different reaction.
So yeah, he gave me a generous helping of Chipotle mayo, and I was just on my way to report on my findings.
Right. I mean, I've worked at this point at 3-4 different firms between all my different summer associate stints, being a paralegal, moving around in Philadelphia. I yeah, I mean, just like the crazy stuff that's happened to me. Like at one firm, I had gone to the professional development director to talk to her about how I can, be proactive about, my career as I, am about to become a new mother. And I had scheduled this meeting with her like weeks ahead of time, definitely on her calendar. She didn't seem surprised to see me. However, when I sat down, I was a little bit confused by the fact that she had a review in her hand. It very clearly said evaluation at the top. Not only that, it had a picture of one of my black girlfriends who was my senior, looks nothing like me, completely different practice group, literally in the corner of the evaluation. And I'm here to talk to her as a first year about, having found out that I was pregnant recently and wanting to just, set up my career, in a successful fashion. She basically started reading the evaluation, and I had to cut her off and be like, I don't think I am who you think I am. And it was very awkward. It was very awkward indeed. And
this is different than, say, a law professor who sees 90 first-year students every year and probably doesn't spend much time learning the names.
Even asking him to distinguish the four is just like too much. He sees so many students.
Yeah, whereas like somebody who's working essentially in a human resources type professional development function.
Right. And then like you have the person like in front of you. The picture is someone completely different. We honestly look nothing alike. I mean, those of you who want to know, I can tell you like who she mixed me up with because we still laugh about it. But it was absurd. It was absurd. And then, yeah, I mean, like, then even, like, moving to, like, a completely different city where, honestly, one of the reasons that we moved to Philadelphia is we were so excited about raising our interracial children in a city that's so diverse. Philadelphia is over 40% Black, and not having grown up here and frankly not knowing a ton about the city's professional culture at all, I just for some reason had it in my head that diversity would be translated in the professional space as well, like the office space and specifically law firms, at least to some degree, even if it was just comparable to New York, but that just wasn't the case at all. And I ended up having, in my first year, probably the most traumatic, I hope what will be the most traumatic event that I've had at the office, but I don't know, guys, we live in a white supremacist culture. Just, stay woke. These things might happen to you too, and it could happen. Something worse can even happen to me in the future. Who knows? But be that as it may. I, on a normal, like, June or August afternoon, received an email from the facilities manager saying that he wanted to meet with me. Didn't know why he'd want to meet with me. He actually sat on my floor and I'd see him in passing sometimes. Let's call him Paul. And Paul was friendly enough, like deals with, broken desks and like leaking ceilings if they were to occur. Isn't really hitting up associates on the regular. So I was very confused about why he wanted to meet. I wrote back to him asking what this meeting was about, and he said that he would prefer to talk about it in person. So I tried to figure out what this could be about. I asked a few of the associates who sit around me whether he had reached out to them as well. None of them really know what the deal is. My friend Daniel, who sits a few doors down from me, says, maybe he's just making rounds about I don't know, new furniture that the office is thinking about getting. Or maybe he actually meant to speak to Daniel himself because Daniel is a, chain smoker and will tell you himself that whenever, he walks down the hallway, it smells like an ashtray. But no one had actually received an email from Paul saying that they actually wanted to meet. So it was just me. Paul comes into my office and... Oh wait, let me backtrack a moment. So I wrote to the practice group coordinator who also sat on our floor and asked if she knew possible Paul wanted to meet with me about, and she said that she believed it was a fragrance issue. So at that point I'm just confused. I asked my office mate to my right whether she's gotten a similar email from Paul because she perpetually had Glade plugins plugged literally into her wall all the time, so the entire hallway smelled like artificial flowers. But she said no, that she hadn't gotten an email from Paul. So yeah, it was just me. So I sit in my office waiting for our meeting to start. Paul walks in. He's very apologetic, extremely awkward from the start. I'm so sorry to have to schedule like this meeting. I really, I've really been dreading this. I haven't wanted to have like this conversation. Yeah, unfortunately it is, it's a fragrance issue. A few people have complained about, your smell. And I'm just very confused. I mean, like if for those of you who know me personally, which is all of you at one point or another, at least in terms of, my direct followers on Instagram, I take extreme pride in my appearance, generally try to be put together. I'm completely aware of, tropes about immigrants and all of that, having been, traumatized by them in my childhood. So I take extreme pride in smelling nice and my hygiene. I spend literally, Augustus can tell you, like ridiculous amounts of money buying beautiful perfumes from all over the world. So I am just very confused about how my scent could possibly be offending people despite all this effort. So I say, Paul, like, I'm confused. Are you talking about like my perfume? And he's like, yes, it's your fragrance. And I'm like, okay, but like which one? Because I use 2 or 3. They're all very different. One is more, woodsy, musky. Another one is like sandalwood based. I have one that's floral. Like which one is, offending? And then he tells me, oh yeah, I mean the folks who complain, they mentioned that you use a few different ones. And yeah, it's all of them. It's all of them. And at this point, I'm like holding back tears at this white man sitting in front of me, telling me that my smell is making people sick and that folks are talking about my smell like all around me. I'm literally the only Black associate on this entire floor in this practice group. This is like not even real life right now. And so I asked, I'm like, have these people like complained about, folks who smoke down the hall, or, the girl who sits in the office next to me with the Glade plugins? And he says, oh yeah, I mean the Glade plugins, those are problematic too. I should probably talk to that person. Yeah, I'll get to them, but like, no, this is a more pressing issue. And unfortunately it's presenting a health concern. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how to play this, because like I understand that this like, affects, your personal like autonomy and all of that. But it's now 2 people who like say that they literally can't breathe when you are around, or like when you walk past.
Well, this is not the end of the story, though.
It's not even the end of it's not even the end of the story, folks. It's not even the end of the story. So I run out of the office crying. Crying, just like humiliated. And like I remember calling you, and like maybe it was the absurdity of it all, but like, I mean, this is like one of those moments where I tell you, like, we're all like still like learning, and like this stuff is like in your face, but you don't even realize it sometimes. Like, I think like your reaction was like, oh, I mean, I don't wear cologne sometimes because like, yeah, like perfumes are like can make people sick.
Yeah, that was my reaction, because my own mother is extremely sensitive to smells and certain perfumes. So I've seen examples of people kind of having a bad reaction to a perfume. So I didn't assume anything about it. I just thought maybe there's somebody in an office. And I have a friend who was, when he started college, he was told by his instructor for like sort of one-on-one instruction, please don't wear any cologne because I'm extremely allergic. And so I'd seen that before, and so I didn't really, I guess I just tried to give the benefit of the doubt, to the person, and sort of assume that, hey, maybe people are not really coming in.
Notwithstanding the fact that no one else in my hallway was, asked about their perfume.
Yeah. I also didn't know all the background facts, to be honest.
Right, and that like all of these secretaries on my floor are rocking like, White Diamonds by Elizabeth Taylor, like no shades, classic, but all very strong. But like no one was speaking to them about it, but yeah. So through some intel, I found out that it was actually a paralegal who had complained about me, and a secretary who sits. Oh yeah, this was like another thing that that Paul had said. I asked him, so like, what is the solution? Because I can't not be smelling good. Like that's just not. No. So he said that he had considered moving me to the other side of the office actually before coming to speak to me, because he wanted to present me with solutions, not problems. But unfortunately, one of the people who had complained about me actually sat on the other side of the office. So couldn't be helped, me making people sick as long as I was around. So
I think I should add to that you're not really a person who puts a lot of perfume.
No.
Because I know people, there's some people who who love wearing perfume and put on a massive amount, but Ottawa is definitely not that way.
Yeah, I mean, like, I had friends who were sitting around me to, like, tell me if, like, my perfume had ever offended them. Like, I really wanted to know. And, like, unless you were, like, hugging me and, like, had, like, your nose in my neck, like, it really wasn't even that serious at all. At any rate, so I found out that it was a secretary and a paralegal who had complained to him, both older white women. Okay. The firm tried to do damage control, especially after I announced I was leaving, and I was definitely leaving after something like that. Admittedly, there were other things too that just weren't great, but, like, that was really the cherry on top, or the straw that broke the camel's back, more appropriately. So the firm had a meeting with all the Black associates to, like, figure out if any of them had experienced, just straight up aggression like this. And at that meeting, another associate who is a good friend of mine, a Black associate in a different department, said how at the beginning of the year, when I had joined the firm and she had wanted to come introduce herself to me, she was just finding all of this, like, just very, very upsetting, hearing about what had happened to me, because when she had come looking for me earlier in the year, she actually had trouble finding my office, and she had stopped by the paralegal's office to see if she knew where R was at. And the paralegal had responded, "Follow the scent," and rolled her eyes and looked down at her papers.
She said scent. She said follow the
Follow
smell.
the smell.
Follow the smell.
Follow the smell. As if I am a dog or a pig or, like, some animal. Yeah. I actually learned that last detail on the day that I left the firm, so as if I didn't feel like shit already about the terms on which I was leaving. I mean, this was really just, like, it's a terrible thing to find out hours before my departure. But honestly, like, there's, like, the explicitly racist.
Do you want to mention also the fact that a Black partner had also been treated the same way about perfume?
Right. And then, like, all of these, like, facts start, like, coming out. Like, apparently there was a partner, a black partner, like, one of, like, 2 female Black partners at the firm, like, was sitting on my floor once upon a time when she was head of, like, diversity, because there's a lot of admin on my floor. And, like, the secretary, not the paralegal, the secretary who had complained about me as well, had apparently complained about her too, and so there was just no way she could stay on the same floor as this partner. She was asthmatic. This partner's perfume was, like, making it so it was impossible for her to breathe. Suspicious. Real suspicious that this partner, okay, had to move offices, okay, because of, like, this, like, I mean, girl, like, how are you even functioning in, like, society being, like, that eggshell plaintiff status? Like, it's just absurd. Okay, so there is obviously, like, the very, like, overt, hurtful racism parts of it. I don't need to tell you guys about all the tropes about immigrants, Black people, Africans, and their smell. We don't even need to go there, because that is, like, whatever. So it's clear on its surface why this was, like, upsetting, and how, interactions like this can be traumatic. But what was really, 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 really hard for me was the conversation that I had with the head of the group when it came time for me to leave. I had, joined the firm with the intention of staying there my entire career. Outwardly it seemed, like a perfect fit for me to, grow and thrive and contribute and all of that. And so it was really, really, really just personally traumatizing to have to, admit, defeat and, like, failure on some level, which is the only way that I, could conceive of my very short-lived experience there at the time. But I went and spoke to him when I was to tell him that I was leaving, and his reaction was so calm. I mean, literally, he looked at me and he said, after I heard about the perfume story, yeah, I mean, I knew it was over. Like, I knew you would be leaving. I knew, and I don't blame you. Like, never having spoken to me before, never having acknowledged it, which he knew about it. Like, he knew, because I let the diversity and inclusion person at the firm know about it, and, she spoke to the chair, like, he knew, yet had never spoken to me, never acknowledged it, never tried to, like, do damage control, just clearly was just like not looking out at all for how this might affect me, even if it meant losing me as an associate. It just was, he wasn't even going to try to go there. And I mean, honestly, like the cost to like my career in terms of having to explain not being at a firm for like an entire year, like the personal just like trauma of it all, you know, it's like, especially having been the only Black associate like in this group, it's like on top of that, have white silence, you know, be a huge reason for like this really traumatic experience that I'll just frankly never forget. It was, I mean, it was really dehumanizing, and I'm never really gonna get over it. I'm just never gonna get over it. And I mean,
I think one sort of trope or motif here that I'd like to emphasize is also, you know, we sort of heard this from other Black professionals as well, is the trauma of not being taken seriously for their accomplishments and not being treated commensurate with their position. And so the reason I point that out is because to say follow the smell is by any standard an extremely disrespectful way to refer to a colleague, but also to somebody who, if we are being honest, outranks you in the workplace. Because, you know, a lot of secretaries are much older women, but they are there as support staff for the attorneys. And so it's sort of almost like, you know, in the hospital, like a receptionist disrespecting a doctor. Yes, they're all colleagues, they should be respectful to each other, but that when you only do that to somebody who is Black as opposed to any attorney.
And I actually didn't even think about it from that angle until you pointed it out, because like I'm so used to people, you know, confusing me for like the secretary or like someone coming to like fix their computer. Like all of these things have actually like happened to me, you know? And so like obviously there's nothing wrong with being a secretary or being, you know, a paralegal or being like the computer support, but like if you worked really, 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 really hard, you know, to get to where you are, and other people who look like you, who have worked really hard too, are just being valued differently than how you're being valued because of like, you know, your skin color versus theirs, like that hurts a lot, you know? And like even like the firm's response to, you know, the Black partners experience with that secretary, the firm's response to, you know, this paralegal, you know, speaking about me in that way, it's just, I personally find it hard to believe that, I mean, I don't think this would have happened at all, truthfully, either of these instances if, you know, we hadn't been Black, but I find it really, really hard to believe that, you know, like no one would have at least spoken to them, and I know no one really spoke to them, so, you know, no one spoke to them, so I just kind of packed up my bags, and it's just no longer the firm's problem. But yeah, so like, I mean, this is all like in the workplace and at law school and like all of this stuff, but like these like really like horrifying like moments, like I mean, they happen within like our own families even, and these are like difficult conversations that like we, you know, have had to have and like continue to have. I think both like our fathers are actually like pretty, you know, diplomatic and like thoughtful, but like both our mothers have said some really problematic stuff. I mean, like my mother has, you know, made comments about how she hopes, you know, my daughter's hair is more like, you know, my son's and Augustus's than mine. How, you know, when I was younger, she'd like make a joke about how I should put a clothespin in my nose to make it narrower. I mean, really crazy stuff. I mean, like, you know, the internalized racism in this white supremacist world that we live in, where, you know, being white and white features are seen as, you know, more beautiful and more worthy. I mean, it's real. It's really real. And like, I'm still in the process of like liberating myself from all that. I mean, in the span of like our relationship, I've gone from being like Sudanese and like always saying that I was Sudanese to being, you know, like describing myself as like African American. And then it's just now recently that I've gotten really comfortable in just saying like Black, like I'm Black. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like your mom.
Yeah, we had a major falling out with my trip. I mean, at one point we had a major falling out with my mother specifically, and at that time it put a strain on my relations with all my family members. But a lot of it comes from a place of, well, I'm not racist. I didn't have a problem with you marrying a Black woman, but sort of not being cognizant of how hurtful certain deeply internalized ideas are, ideas which are not true but seem like have really kind of crawled up into people's background thinking. And so one example being, this is more of an example of just not really being cognizant of how the weight of the hurt from the weight of the long history of racism that it has on people. So at one point, my mom was asking Ottawa whether, she was asking about black males in France who catcall on women, and she said, there are these guys who catcall on women. Do they not catcall you because you're sort of like one of them? Do they is that you probably don't have that problem? And it's sort of, that's obviously messed up on many different levels, but the inability to see why that would be, why any kinds of ideas, sort of messed up ideas about race would be especially hurtful to somebody, is, I think, part of white privilege, because you don't walk, I don't walk around the world feeling the weight of what my skin looks like. I've spent 13 years in this country, have been treated super nicely by everybody, and yes, I've faced my own challenges, but never because of what I look like. Let's say one of the things that really kind of brings it home for me is in college I had huge hang-ups about social class, and sort of felt like I don't belong here, I am kind of, this is such an elite environment, I don't come from this, and to the point where when I was a senior, I literally had a panic attack when I attended sort of a professional presentation about one of the firms people were going to. I've worked through that quite successfully because people have treated me in such a welcoming fashion, and obviously I have never been treated any kind of messed up way because of the way I look. So it's been easy to sort of leave that behind, but when this sort of dehumanizing treatment, lack of dignity that you give to people,
right,
goes to the way you look, you can't really work through that. No matter how thick your skin is, no matter how sort of how strong a personality you are.
It's interacting with people who in their heart of hearts would never want to be black, take immense comfort in their whiteness. I mean, that's tough, right? I mean, your mother has also said to me how, when we first got together, she was a little bit concerned about me being Muslim, but that wasn't even that was just kind of the tip of the iceberg for her, because she didn't want to tell people about us. About you dating a black girl, especially because in Lithuania, black people are considered stupid and lazy and they smell bad. So it would be humiliating for her to tell them that, you had lowered yourself and married a black girl. And then, after meeting me, then she, saw that I was lovely and nice and all of that. But that still tells me that, on some level, she definitely subscribes to white supremacist ideology, right? Because you have these thoughts about black people, but then you also are creating some kind of exceptionalism for me, which carries its own guilt and trauma, to be honest.
Yeah, but the other piece to that is, I think, she was saying it from a perspective of, I don't think that anymore. I used to think that, but pat myself on the back, I don't think that anymore. But without realizing entirely how, let's say, recounting very, very hurtful stereotypes about people could be sort of demoralizing for somebody to hear.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this is all to say that I appreciate some of y'all are not trying to be political or public that with your private conversations, but this is an issue that concerns everyone. And as far as I'm concerned, you not talking about this stuff publicly just means you just do not care about me. Honestly, you do not care about what I've been through. You don't care about me as a person or my feelings or that of any other black people that and who are telling you like, yo, like our house is literally engulfed in flames. You're walking past them with like a cell phone and a fire extinguisher. Yes, a fire extinguisher isn't gonna like put out the house that's like burning, but like it helps. The gesture of like blowing that fire extinguisher at the house suggests you care. Like that is like literally like what your silence like feels like. It feels like complete shit. It's really unacceptable. I will say, obviously everything that we've just like told you about like what I've been through, I'm like there's so many other stories like out there. I really hope, you know, my Black friends will share them. And it's bad. All of this actually like is within the same spectrum of, you know, police brutality. That is to say that this is like, on the one end, there are these like microaggressions that we face, various degrees, even amongst the stories like I told you. And the other end of that is just like police just straight up killing Black people in like broad daylight, civilians, you know, killing Black people in like broad daylight. But like at the root of this is just like a plea to recognize like Black people's dignity. You know, that's really what this is. Like, it's like a plea for like dignity, the recognition that we are human, we are equal. Like, you have made it so it seems like we are not equal, but we should be treated equally, and we should not be, you know, like suffering in this manner. Like literally people like are out here suffering from like depression unlike anything that they've experienced in their life, because like this movement is bringing forth so much pain, right? And like especially in like the context of like COVID and all that, I am personally like really hopeful that even if this isn't the movement that changes everything, it has progressed the conversation substantially forward. And I am sure a lot of you, you know, especially like non-Black immigrants especially, are like, oh, like what can I do? Like I've suffered in like my own way. But like, as like Hassan Minhaj like recently told us, like you guys have benefited from, you know, the immense struggle that Black people have faced in the past and continue to struggle. This is something that concerns everyone. And even if it's just using your platform to reach, you know, the one or two people that like follow you and like actively like read your stories, if that is really like the only people that you would reach, like you speaking about, you know, your experience is coming to terms with like your internalized, you know, like white supremacist like ideas, like you spreading information that you find useful, you educating, you know, trying to like educate people, like, you know, like it's very empowering. It makes, you know, your Black friends feel good. Hopefully, you know, you feel like it's making you a better person and you're contributing positively to this world. And then also like it really empowers others to then in turn share with their communities too, and to like challenge their own beliefs. So like, you don't need to be like an influencer. You don't need to have like hundreds of followers to, you know, feel like you should be saying something. You should absolutely be saying something. You should be saying something like publicly. Like these like small conversations like in private are just like not enough. This is kind of like, this is an all hands on deck kind of situation. And, you know, like there's like a saying in like Lithuanian that I think is like really, you know, powerful. Do you want to say it in Lithuanian?
Yeah. Lašas po lašo ir akmenį pratašo, which means a drop after a drop sort of cuts a stone.
Yeah, drop by drop breaks a rock, y'all. So you really should be speaking. Another thing that I hope, you know, you will take away from this, like, you know, this video, is that really think twice, y'all, before you know, like say something to like traumatize someone. Like think twice about how you react when someone is like telling you that they think that they just experienced something really racist, something that's like really upsetting them at the very least, you know. And like that is a process. Like Augustus will tell you, like he's still learning. It's probably gonna be like a lifelong struggle, just because we just like experience this world very differently. People interact with us like very differently. But just because you personally have not, you know, had someone come at you crazy because of racism does not mean that racism does not exist. Okay, and that's like really important to highlight. And then the last thing is like I'm seeing like a lot of posts on Instagram about like voting here, register for your votes, etc. Like I live in Philadelphia. Like most of public officials in this city are blue, if not all of them. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's definitely like a blue city, and a lot like New York City is blue. Like there's a lot of blue cities that are now committing like the worst acts of police brutality ever, and like have been places where terrible things have happened, like, you know, Eric Garner in New York, like the police like literally like blowing up like Black homes, like, and Black people like with bombs right here in Philadelphia. So like it is not enough to say like, oh vote for Democrats, you have to get Trump out, right? Like it's just not enough. So you have to be thoughtful about voting. And that's a process for me too, you know, like even like within like this week, like learning so much about like the defunding the police. Like that was definitely like 2 weeks ago. That was not something that I could speak, you know, eloquently on at all, you know, and like that is informative, and that is the power of social media. And so I personally, I know I'm not, I keep going back and forth, and Gus and I are constantly joking about how like I'm just like schizophrenic with like hashtag like cancel so and so versus, you know, hashtag like restorative justice and trying to like have conversations. But like I've really reconciled myself to the fact that the only way that we can like move this conversation forward is like, you know, us just like really just being like open to being vulnerable and being wrong and like using like our voices. That's the only way that this is gonna work. So I do still feel, you know, extremely hurt that some of you haven't spoken, or some of you have just like, you know, written to me like on the side to like ask how I am without using like your platform at all to like publicly indicate that you care that Black Lives Matter. But I am hopeful that, you know, you will consider changing your ways, because I mean, really, like, this is just, like, dignity at this point. Like, it's messed up.